Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is honestly so incredibly relatable, but also surprisingly deep, and frankly, kind of exhausting. We're talking about the psychology of the apology shield. Let's figure out exactly why we do this. Let's kick things off with a question that might hit a little close to home for some of us. Why do you apologize for existing? You know what I mean, right? Have you ever found yourself saying sorry for things that absolutely, literally aren't your fault? Like maybe you apologize when someone else bumps into you on the sidewalk? Or you find yourself typing, I'm so sorry, but just to ask a totally normal everyday work question. It's wild, right? So why on earth do we actually do this?
Well, outwardly, it just looks like you're being exceptionally polite or maybe just really humble. And hey, society usually applauds that kind of behavior. But psychology? Psychology tells a totally different story. It tells us this habit is actually about managing an invisible threat. We really need to bust this myth right now. Over-apologizing is not just about having good manners. It's actually a profound, deeply ingrained psychological reflex.
All right, moving into section 1, the apology reflex, and moving beyond politeness. Because here's the thing, for a lot of people, saying sorry isn't really a conscious choice at all. It's an automatic reflex. I mean, it fires off before you even have a split second to process the situation. And to truly grasp why this reflex happens, we can't just look at what's happening right now in the present. We have to look backward. We have to look at how your brain first learned to navigate the world and its early relationships. Okay, let's really dive into this definition of the apology shield. It is a learned psychological tool used to reduce uncertainty and avoid conflict before it even starts. Notice the key word there. It's a tool. In your mind, an apology isn't just a word you say when you've done something wrong. Your brain is using it as a preemptive defense mechanism. It's literally throwing up a shield to de-escalate a potential conflict before that conflict even has a chance to exist.
Which brings us to section 2, a learned survival pattern and the childhood connection.
Let's walk through this timeline together just to see exactly how this behavior builds over time. Looking at years 1 through 12, if you grew up in an environment where you experienced frequent criticism, or maybe you were just made to feel like the problem child, your developing brain was taking notes. It was absorbing all of that. Then, moving into years 13 to 18, your brain synthesized that data and learned a really critical lesson. Being preemptively sorry was pretty much the only effective way to maintain your safety and keep the peace. And then boom, we hit years 18 and beyond. That early conditioning has completely solidified into this ingrained adult apology reflex. Growing up in that kind of environment forged a very, very specific survival pattern. So the crucial goal here boils down to this exact phrase: reduce uncertainty. You see, your brain absolutely craves predictability. When you learned early on that your needs, or honestly, even just your physical presence, might be viewed as an inconvenience to the people around you, keeping the peace became paramount. So you throw out an apology to reduce the uncertainty of how that other person might react. You're basically just trying to control the temperature of the room. Let's look at section 3, the fear of being replaced and the burden of conditional value. Because deep down, there is this worry. You worry that if you aren't perfectly easy to get along with, people will just simply move on. And this connects directly to a really deep-seated feeling of being replaceable. Think about it. When someone operates under the belief that their value to others is strictly conditional, meaning they're only loved or kept around if they're perfectly compliant and absolutely frictionless, they become terrified of causing even the slightest ripple. Now, what's really interesting about this is the idea of trying to prove you aren't a burden. When you feel replaceable, what do you naturally do? Well, you start over-giving. You start over-apologizing just to secure your spot in a relationship. But ultimately, these behaviors are really just desperate forms of approval seeking. You are constantly submitting this sort of verbal resume, completely disguised as an apology, just trying to prove you aren't a burden so they won't replace you. Moving right along to section 4, hyper-awareness and identity and the exhausting internal monologue. And wow, this hyper-awareness cycle is rapid fire. Your brain is just constantly scanning for small shifts in tone. You're immediately noticing slight body language changes in the person you're talking to. And the very second you sense a tiny bit of tension, you're instantly assuming that you caused that tension. Then, long after the chat is over, you're replaying conversations in your head, checking them for weirdness or awkwardness. It's just this relentless, anxiety-driven internal monologue of someone constantly scanning for social mistakes, all so they can apologize and regain a sense of control. Which brings us to another really fascinating concept, the identity threat. This is the intense fear that failing to apologize will result in you being mislabeled as difficult or arrogant. Because for some people, apologizing isn't just about avoiding a fight, it's a way to protect a very specific identity. You use apologies to manage your image, basically ensuring everyone still sees you as the reliable, nice person, because any other label, that feels like an absolute threat to who you are. Let's head into our final section. Section 5, dropping the shield and unlearning the habit. Listen, your mind isn't working against you here. It's really just using an old survival mechanism that you simply no longer need. And honestly, this is the best news of the day. Because this pattern was learned in the past as a way to protect you, it can absolutely be unlearned today. Your brain is basically just running outdated software. You are safe now. And this brilliantly illustrates our path forward. Step 1, recognize the old survival mechanism. Just start noticing when you're throwing out a sorry purely to reduce uncertainty. Catch yourself when you're scanning the room. Step 2, stop trying to earn your place with apologies. You really don't have to submit an apology resume just to justify your existence in a room. And step 3, start seeing your own unconditional value clearly. Once you realize you aren't a burden, the shield can finally, naturally come down. Which brings us to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. If you drop the shield, who are you? When you strip away all the people-pleasing, that exhausting hyper-awareness, and the constant apologies for simply taking up space, what's left underneath? I highly encourage you to discover that true identity. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope exploring this architecture helps you unlearn some of those old habits. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.